She saved a wounded cowboy, not knowing he was the millionaire who owned the county. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. The forest breathed softly that morning, still, chilled, untouched. Spring had barely nudged its way into the pines. A gray mist hugged the underbrush like a secret, and every step Clara Jenkins took sent whispers through the damp earth beneath her boots. She walked with purpose, but not haste. A basket of herbs swung from one arm, her father's old coat wrapped tight around her. It smelled faintly of pipe smoke and cedar, worn thin at the elbows but still strong like he had been. She'd walked this trail 100 times before, yet today, something tugged at her differently. Grief sat quietly in her chest, heavy but familiar. Her notebook remained unopened, dangling from her wrist, forgotten in the quiet ache of memory. Then she saw it. Not a deer, not a fallen branch. A shape. Wrong, too still, too human. Half buried in ferns and soil, blood darkening the earth beneath it. She froze. For a moment, her mind rejected what her eyes saw. Then her breath caught, sharp and sudden, and her feet moved on instinct. She dropped to her knees. A man. Mid-30s, maybe. Face pale beneath a layer of grime and shadow, jaw clenched, lips parted just enough to let air through. A wound stretched across his side, angry, raw, soaked. Clara's hands trembled as they reached for his neck, searching for life. A pulse, faint but steady, thumped beneath her fingers. Relief surged up her spine, tangled with fear. He was alive. Barely. Hold on, she whispered, though she doubted he could hear her. With no time to think, she tore the hem of her skirt and pressed it to the bleeding. Her coat slipped off her shoulder as she leaned closer, shielding him from the breeze. The forest around her vanished into a blur. There was only him now. This stranger. Broken, bleeding, dying in her woods. She didn't ask who he was. Didn't wonder why he was there. Those questions belonged to later. Now was survival. She glanced around. No help in sight, no phone signal. She'd have to carry him. Or drag him. She wasn't strong, but stubbornness had always served her better than muscle. Clara wrapped the makeshift bandage tighter, braced her knees against the ground, and gritted her teeth. The man groaned softly as she shifted him, his eyelids fluttering once before falling shut again. She could see now, under the blood and dirt, his clothes were rough but well-made. A rancher's coat, a faded flannel, worn jeans. Not a drifter. Not someone used to being helpless. Clara hauled him to his feet, one arm over her shoulder, his weight nearly buckling her legs. But she didn't let go, because something deep in her gut, the same instinct that guided her through every storm, told her this moment mattered. That helping this man wasn't just the right thing. It was the beginning of something far bigger than either of them knew. She didn't know his name, didn't know his past, but she knew this. She wasn't going to let him die. Not today, not in her woods. The fire crackled softly, casting shadows that danced across the wooden walls. Inside the modest farmhouse, the air was thick with the scent of lavender and burning oak. Clara moved quietly, barefoot on worn floorboards, her fingers stained green from crushed leaves and wild herbs. A kettle hissed over the flames, steam curling into the dim space like a ghost of thought she couldn't shake. He lay still, on a cot fashioned from her father's old hunting bed and a stack of woolen quilts. The man breathed in shallow rhythms, barely stirring, barely present. His flannel shirt was cut open, soaked and stiff from blood she had long since washed away. Bandages wrapped his ribs and shoulder, the handiwork of a woman who'd learned to mend wounds from farm accidents and books, not war or violence. Yet something in the way he bled told her this was no simple injury. This man had been hunted. He groaned once, lips twitching, eyes flickering open for a heartbeat. Pale blue met her gaze, intense, startled, burning with pain. Then he slipped back under. Clara didn't ask questions. Not out loud. Not yet. She called him Cole. Not because he told her, but because of those eyes, blue as sky over coal hills. She needed a name to speak to, and stranger felt too cold for someone she'd pulled from death. By day, she returned to the fields. The soil waited for no one, and the chickens still clucked in ignorant rhythm. She watered the rows, fixed the broken gate, chopped firewood. But always, her thoughts returned to the man in her home, to the silence that stretched between them, to the flicker in her chest when she'd find him watching her from under heavy lids. Nights were quieter. She would read aloud by lamplight old poems, Bible verses, the back of seed catalogs, just to fill the silence. She told him things she hadn't said aloud in years. About her mother's singing voice, her father's stubborn pride, the year the roof caved in during a storm and they had to sleep under tarps. He never responded, yet it didn't feel like talking to a wall. He listened, even in sleep. She could feel it. There was something alive in the stillness, something more than just a man healing. Clara noticed the strength in his hands when she changed the bandages. Calloused palms. Scars that ran deep and long, old as sorrow. Not the kind you get from fencing or farming. The kind earned in darker places. His arms held the story of a life lived hard, and it made her wonder, not with fear, but curiosity. Who was he before the blood? Before the forest? Before her? Sometimes she caught herself hoping he'd stay. Just for a little while. Just long enough to explain the silence. To tell her whether she'd done the right thing by saving him. Until then, she kept tending him with the same quiet devotion she gave her land. Because some things didn't need answers to be worth holding on to. Recovery came slowly, not in leaps but in quiet moments. The man who'd once bled into her floor now stood beside her, steadier with each passing day. He moved with the caution of someone who'd learned to live through pain, shoulders tense, steps uneven, but purposeful. Clara noticed the change before he said a word. She'd catch him watching her as she worked, his gaze trailing her movements as she hung laundry or fed the hens. He never stared long enough to seem improper, but just enough to stir something in her chest she couldn't quite name. A flicker of warmth, a spark of wonder. He chopped wood beside her one morning, the axe heavy and hands still bruised. She offered to take over. He shook his head once, then leaned the handle against the stump and silently joined her in stacking logs. No thanks, no words, just shared breath and cold air. It was enough. One evening, as she wrapped fresh linen around his healing side, his hand slipped over hers. Not firm, not demanding, just a touch, brief and deliberate. Her pulse faltered. She didn't look up. Neither did he. The silence between them had grown rich, full of meaning. At night, she read by firelight, pages rustling, flames whispering, his eyes always following her voice. She never asked for conversation. She offered presence instead. Then came the storm. It rolled in fast, wind snapping against the windows, sky cracking open with sound. The lights went dark, leaving the house soaked in shadow. Clara lit candles with calm precision, as if she'd done it 1,000 times. In the flickering glow, Cole, her name for him still holding, sat near the hearth, shoulders wrapped in a quilt, staring at the flame like it held answers. She joined him, pulling her chair closer. For minutes, there was only the storm and the steady drip of rain from the eaves. Then his voice broke the stillness. You saved me. Rough. Quiet. Like gravel scraped across velvet. 3 words, but they landed inside her with the weight of a life. Clara turned to him. He didn't meet her eyes, just stared into the fire like it had spoken for him. She could have asked his name, could have pressed him for the story behind the blood and the silence. But she didn't. Not yet. Something in his voice, something fragile, told her the dam had cracked, but not burst. She simply nodded, heart thudding louder than the rain. You're welcome, she whispered. And that was all. In the days that followed, little changed on the surface. He still rose early, still moved without noise. She still left books by his bedside, still brewed tea he never requested. But between them, the quiet had shifted. It wasn't emptiness anymore. It was a space they shared. The silence had become a language of its own, and in that stillness, something unnamed had begun to grow. Not trust. Not yet. But something close. Something steady. Something neither of them was quite ready to lose. Dust curled behind the black truck long before it reached the gate. Clara stood on the porch, dish towel still in hand, eyes narrowing as the vehicle crept up her dirt road, slow, deliberate, out of place. The engine cut off with a low growl. 2 men stepped out, boots thick with dust, hats pulled low. Not neighbors. Not lost travelers. They moved like men with a purpose, like men used to being obeyed. Morning, ma'am, the taller one said, offering a nod more out of habit than respect. You seen anyone pass through here recently? Maybe limping, rough shade. Clara's grip tightened around the towel, but her voice didn't waver. Just me and the chickens. The second man scanned the yard, his eyes taking in the chopped wood, the clothesline, the faint print of a man's boot near the barn. Clara stood still, firm, daring them to challenge her calm. They didn't. Strange weather for someone to be wandering off injured, the tall one muttered. You let us know if you hear anything. I will, she lied. They drove off slower than they came, their silence heavier than any goodbye. Inside, Cole stood behind the curtain, jaw clenched, color drained from his face. I know them, he said finally, voice low. Or at least, who they work for. He sank onto the edge of the bed like the weight of remembering had pulled his legs from beneath him. They left me for dead, he added. Shot me off my horse. Didn't even check if I was still breathing. Clara sat across from him, the space between them suddenly sharp with tension. Danger hadn't just passed her gate. It had stepped into her home days ago, bleeding and nameless. And she had welcomed it without question. She felt the fear, cold and sudden, but she didn't retreat. She studied his face, haunted, angry, confused. Not cruel, not untrustworthy. How bad is it? She asked softly. They think I'm dead, he replied. That gives us time. But not much. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The wind rattled the windows, but the unease came from inside. She walked out into the yard barefoot, drawn by the low orange glow of the lantern hanging off the porch. Cole was there, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the sky. Stars blinked down, indifferent to the fear twisting below them. He didn't turn when she joined him. You ever regret saving someone? He asked, almost like he was asking the stars instead. Clara didn't hesitate. Not once. Only then did he look at her. No smile, no thanks. Just quiet understanding. Maybe even something close to awe. For a long moment, they stood side by side, the night holding them in its stillness. She had lied to strangers, sheltered a man hunted by shadows, put herself in the path of whatever past he carried. But Clara didn't flinch from the choice she'd made. Some people save lives with medicine, others with bullets. She'd done it with trust. And she wasn't done yet. Rain had come like judgment, unyielding, heavy, and loud. For 3 days, it pounded the roof of Clara's farmhouse, drowning the world in gray. The fields turned to mud, the roads vanished into floodwater, and time itself seemed to pause. She and Cole were trapped in a space too small for secrets to survive. He barely spoke the first day, sat by the window, watching the rain stripe the glass like prison bars. On the second, he helped her stack firewood and patch a drip in the roof, both pretending the silence wasn't pulsing with things unsaid. But by the third evening, when the fire crackled low and the storm dulled to a steady hum, he finally broke. I wasn't just out for a ride, he began, voice rough like gravel under wheels. I was checking the perimeter, had reports of cattle missing, fences cut. Figured it was nothing. Clara didn't interrupt. She didn't even look up, just stirred the stew and waited. They sabotaged my horse. Took the saddlebag, left the trail covered. Then, gunshot. Close. Too close. I went down before I even saw who fired. He paused. Rain tapped softly on the window pane, the only sound between his words. They meant to kill me. No doubt in my mind. They thought I was dead. Clara set the spoon down slowly, her chest tightening. Who would do that to you? He looked up at her, eyes clear now. No haze of pain, just truth. People who want what I have, or what I was born to have. The words hit harder than any confession she'd imagined. Not a fugitive, not a lost ranch hand. She felt the room tilt around her. I'm Colton Wade, he said. Wade County Holdings. It's mine, or it was, before someone decided to bury me. Clara froze. That name wasn't just familiar, it was carved into signs, stamped on grain silos, whispered in local gossip. The reclusive heir. The man who rarely left his estate. Richer than the soil his boots walked on. And he'd been under her roof for weeks, bleeding, breathing, silent. You're him, she whispered, the words hollow with disbelief. I didn't mean to lie, he said quickly, catching the shift in her eyes. I didn't even know who I was for days. She looked at him differently now, not with fear, but with the weight of understanding. The man she'd cared for wasn't just a survivor. He was the kind of man who had enemies. He noticed her retreat, barely a flicker, but enough. I needed to disappear, he said quietly. But not like this. He turned back toward the fire, jaw clenched. Clara sat beside him, close enough to feel the heat, but said nothing. She didn't know what frightened her more, the danger that came with his truth, or how much she wanted to keep him safe anyway. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the storm had already passed. And in its wake, nothing between them was the same. The storm had passed, leaving the air scrubbed clean and the world glistening under a newborn sun. Drops clung to every leaf, every beam of the porch, as if reluctant to let go. Clara stepped outside. The wood cool beneath her feet, and saw him there, coal, sleeves rolled, hammer in hand, driving nails with a rhythm that felt older than time. He worked with purpose. Not rushed, not showy. Each motion sure, each placement deliberate. As if fixing something gave him back pieces of himself. She stood quietly, watching the way he moved, until he finally spoke. "My father left everything to me," he said without turning. "The ranch. The holdings. The land stretching beyond what most folks could ever ride across." He straightened, wiped sweat from his brow, and leaned on the post he'd just secured. But he didn't leave trust. That died long before he did. Clara listened, arms crossed, not out of defense, but to hold in the storm she still felt inside. "They want to divide it," he continued. "Carve it up. Sell what isn't theirs. Men I once called partners. One of them gave the order to take me out." Her breath caught. The truth was sharp, yet it didn't startle her. Somehow she'd known. Maybe not the details, but the weight behind his silence all along. "I didn't trust anyone," he added, voice quieter now. "Not until I woke up in your house, bandaged by a woman who should have left me to die." Clara looked down, unsure what to say. She was no hero, just a schoolteacher with calloused hands and a stubborn streak. What did she know of inheritance wars or empires held together by blood and contracts? "I don't belong in your world," she murmured. He stepped forward, closing the space between them with a quiet certainty. "I don't belong in that world either. Not anymore." He reached out, not with flash or fanfare, but with the honesty of a man who had nothing left to pretend. "I want to rebuild. Not just fences and barns, but what matters. The parts they couldn't buy or break." His hand, open, waiting. "I can't do it alone." She hesitated, caught between fear and longing. She saw not the air, not the myth, but the man. The one who bled on her floor, chopped wood by her side, whispered thanks in the dark. A man who had nearly been lost to greed and shadows, now offering her a place not just on his land, but in his life. She took his hand. The sky above was endless now, blue and vast. The storm had ripped away everything false. And what remained was real. A man who wanted to live. A woman who dared to trust again. Two hearts, once hidden, now laid bare beneath the same sky. Sunlight spilled across the fairgrounds like a blessing. The scent of roasted corn and cinnamon hung thick in the air, laughter rising between the hum of engines and music from a fiddle band on the main stage. Booths lined the dirt path, each bursting with color and pride, from hand-stitched quilts to fresh peach preserves. But what caught everyone's eye wasn't a prize-winning pie or the blue-ribbon cattle. It was Colton Wade, walking hand in hand with the woman who had once dragged him from death's edge. He moved with quiet authority, no longer the ghost who vanished into pine needles and blood. Beside him, Clara wore her usual modest dress and a look of quiet strength. The crowd parted around them like waves before a returning king, but he wasn't alone this time. He didn't want to be. Whispers floated through the fair like dandelion seeds. "That's him. That's her. Is that the teacher from the old McCreary place?" But neither of them flinched. They didn't need approval. They had already fought their battle and won. Colton stopped in front of the main tent, turned to face the town he once ruled from a distance, and spoke not like a tycoon, but a man reborn. "This is Clara Jenkins," he said. "My partner. In business and in life. No hesitation. No shame." A hush fell, but not for long. Applause followed, hesitant at first, then warm and genuine. Because people knew what it took to come back. They respected a man who bled for his legacy and the woman who refused to let him die alone. Behind the smiles and ribbon cuttings, real change had taken root. Together, they'd launched a foundation for wounded veterans, offering land, work, and dignity to those who'd nearly been forgotten. Clara taught again, not in a crumbling one-room schoolhouse, but in a new building raised with Wade funds and community hands. Her students flourished. Because she knew what it meant to fight for something worth keeping. The county had changed. Not by force or decree, but by presence. The man who owned it no longer hid behind gates in silence. And the woman once overlooked now stood at his side, not as decoration, but as equal. Colton had power. Clara gave it purpose. As dusk painted the sky in amber and rose, they sat together on a hay bale, watching the fireworks begin. His hand rested lightly over hers. No words needed. The air between them spoke enough. She'd found him bleeding in the woods, name unknown, future uncertain. Now, he stood whole, and hers. Clara, once the quiet girl on the edge of town, had claimed her place not by birthright or fortune, but by compassion, resilience, and love. A county once built on wealth and silence now thrived on truth and second chances. And the woman who saved a stranger? She saved a legacy too. If you enjoyed this story, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing, heartfelt stories like this. Also, let us know where you are watching from, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Mention the names Clara and Colton if their journey moved you. Did Clara's bravery inspire you? Did Colton's transformation touch your heart? We'd love to hear what moments stood out to you most. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories of resilience, love, and redemption to life. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that just might change your day.